You're listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show, where wealth is empowering, purpose is crucial, and high vibes are non-negotiable. And now, here's your host, certified business coach and practical woo strategist, Sara J Loureiro.
Welcome back to another episode of the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. Today is going to be a fun episode with one of my amazing clients. This is Grace Robles. So, Grace, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, and let's get started with some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Sara. I am an emotional intimacy coach for women in long-term love. I help them feel wanted, seen, and whole again without leaving their relationships. I use a framework that I created called the reconnection theory that's based out of a lived experience of my own where I saved my own marriage. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and for everyone here, Grace also has a podcast coming out with her husband. What is the name of your podcast if they want to look for it?
Oh, yes, it's called We Said It with Steve and Grace.
I love it. Okay, great. I'm excited for this. So go ahead, my dear. What are your questions?
So, having you as a coach, a mentor, and being so successful, there are things that I want to just dig your brain, and help me along my own journey. And how do you keep your own nervous system grounded when your business holds such tender emotional terrain for others?
Oh my goodness, this is such a great question. Because the emotional aspect of your business is so real, especially when you are a coach for women. And so even though I'm a business coach, I still hold on to a lot of emotions. There's still a lot of like emotional toll that is handled with everything that we do. And I would say up until probably this past year, so I've been at around like 600, maybe a little bit over that, maybe 700K in terms of income for the past 3 years. And I would say it was only this year that I actually started outsourcing a lot of the emotional aspect of my business. And so I'm going to kind of explain a little bit of why this is the case. Before that, in terms of like me being able to handle and grasp all of the emotion for my business, I would honestly, there's a lot of self-care that you need to do to maintain your own groundedness with your clients. And then also just understand that like, you don't necessarily have to go that deep and that intense after your sessions with your clients. Like that is also a personal choice. And so there's a part of yourself that you need to detach from the work that you do. A lot of emotional detachment, a lot of like cutting the cords, and also understanding that once you victimize any of your clients, they become disempowered. And I think that that's a really big and really important thing because our clients aren't coming to us to feel like a victim, right? Our clients aren't coming to us, especially as coaches, to be like, look at how much of a victim I am and I want you to feel sorry for me. Our clients are coming to us and telling us their stories that often put themselves in victimhood, but they're like, I want to change. I want to be empowered. I want to grow. And so if we hold on to too much of their emotions, we're actually holding on to too much victimhood for them as well, and we're not allowing them to grow. And so I would say the more that you can detach yourself from that, and the more that you can detach yourself from, really wanting to help them in that way as much as you can, the better it also is going to be for them. Because the more that they can lean on you as a really helpful guide and leader, but less as the person who they come to vent to, and less as the person as they come to cry to, let's say, for example, the more that they can actually pick themselves up, because the more that you can show them emotional regulation, especially with what you do, because you're doing relationship coaching, right? The more that you can show them really strong leadership in terms of emotional intelligence, the more that they can mirror that off of you. And so I think that that's the first thing, is understanding that like the level of emotional regulation that you are creating within your business is a direct mirror and reflection of like what your clients want to see from you. So you want to make sure that you can uphold that level of regulation and uphold that level of leadership for them as well, without sinking into those beliefs of like, oh, I have a victim in front of me. Because the minute that someone's a victim, they can no longer be empowered. Does that make sense?
Complete sense. That
Mhm.
shift is very powerful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I would say that the other part that like I said, I've kind of outsourced a little bit more that I probably should have outsourced earlier on in my business is I basically anything that I know that is going to trigger me and is not going to give me the best version of myself for my clients, I actually hire that out. So, what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, if someone has a billing question, if I'm triggered by billing, then okay, well, one of my assistants has to manage billing. Or if a client has an issue that I know that I would be triggered by, maybe one of my assistant coaches would need to handle that issue first, and then it would kind of go through me. And so it's also understanding that as you grow, you can no longer be the only person that your clients and your community come to. And it's not just clients, right? Like emotional regulation also comes from comments. It also comes from followers. It also comes from people who reply to your emails. And I've outsourced a lot of that from the beginning. I learned from some really, really great entrepreneurs that one of the best things that you can do is just kind of shield your energy. And so the more that you can shield your energy from other people's really dysregulated emotions, the more that it will help you to stay regulated. Because once again, the more that you stay regulated, the more that you hold a really great leadership mirror for your clients and your potential clients. So for what you know that you can't realistically handle. And so I think for me, it was only up until around these past few years where I realized that, okay, this is, I think, a little bit too much for me to handle emotionally. That's when I started outsourcing specific tasks so that I can hold my energy for the most important tasks that I have for my clients.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that wisdom.
Mhm.
I never would have thought of that, how it does steal your energy.
Yeah, so, so important. And so it starts shielding your energy from your community and from other people's emotions really does start from your social media. It starts from how do you decide to read your comments? How, like, are you the first person in your DMs? Are you the first person who sees email replies? All of those things can really shield you and really protect you, especially if you're a really polarizing person, or especially if you know that there are going to be people who are triggered by what it is that you do. And if you are in turn someone who's very sensitive or someone who's very triggered, then it's a really great idea to shield yourself from that because you don't know how much time your nervous system is going to need in order to re-regulate itself. And, some of these comments that you get online, or most of them actually, aren't even from people who would ever want to work with you. Right. So if it's completely irrelevant to your business, then we shouldn't even allow it to affect us.
Right. I have experienced that this past weekend. So, yes.
There
Wow.
you go, right? And I think that, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things and there are a lot of people who will tell you, well, you need to be okay with yourself first and learn that self-love first. And I totally agree with that as well. And that is another part of it is once you learn to love and accept yourself unconditionally, the things trigger you less. However, as you're growing and scaling your business, it doesn't mean that nothing triggers you. It doesn't mean that, nothing will ruin your day. Like you're human, right? Like you're a human with emotions. And so you want to kind of you kind of want to play on both sides of that team. So one of them is love and accept yourself unconditionally. And anything that anyone's telling you, understand that it could be triggering something inside of you that hasn't healed. But then at the same time, that also doesn't mean that like you need to go into your negative comments and, see all 100 of them at once. Like because you also want to protect what it is that you've created for yourself.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, keep them coming.
Yes. All right. So, I'm working with women who often stay silent, right? And so my messaging has to meet them when they're in silence, but not scroll past my message. How do you craft messaging that honors emotional depth without getting lost in over explaining or sounding too heavy for the internet?
Mm. Ooh, this is good. Okay, so in your instance, we're talking about emotional depth. And we're talking about, we're dealing with relationships here. So when we're dealing with relationships, we're dealing with a lot of emotional depth. And we want to make sure that we're meeting the client where they're at. So where are they at in their journey, right? This is a really, really important thing to understand. So let's say, for example, if they're going through a breakup, are they right at the beginning of the breakup? Are they at the end of the breakup? Are they in the middle? Are they kind of yo-yoing back and forth with the same person because they don't know where to go? Like, where are they in this exact moment where they're going to want and need your help? And I'll give you an example. I had a client who she realized that all of her best clients were 39 and had just broken up with someone. And so it's like it sparked for her clients, it sparked that whole like, my ovaries are dying, right? So like I'm getting less eggs. I need to find a partner, like the clock is ticking and I just broke up with this guy. And so it sparked for that person. It just like, okay, they were at this like impetus of change. And so when she discovered that and when she discovered where they were at in terms of their journey, then we started to create content that spoke directly to where that client was in that journey. And so that's one part, is speaking to that. And then in terms of the emotional depth and like not losing people on the internet, is one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten in terms of making sure that your content is accessible is making sure that your content can be understood by a 10-year-old. Okay, so by someone who's in grade 5, if they can read your content, if they can understand it, that is the best way to make it understood by your ideal client as well. Because you don't want to guess whether or not they know a lot of these like deeper terms or these like deeper subliminal messages. Because oftentimes one of the worst things that happens with coaches is that we have so much knowledge, but we try to talk to the client at the level of knowledge that we have, but our client is not at that level of knowledge at all. And so a really good precursor for that is just to, if a 10-year-old, 10, 11, 12-year-old, if they can understand it, if they can read what it is you're saying, and if they can understand most of it, that's when you're safe in terms of making sure that your content is accessible to your ideal client. Does that make sense?
Total sense. I've been guilty of that. What you're saying, getting
All
lost
do.
in my yeah. Okay, so I have a question about balancing leadership and intimacy. What
Mm.
what mindset shift helped you finally own your role as a high ticket guide and not a hand holder?
Ooh, I have to think about this one, Grace. This one's really good. High ticket guide and not a hand holder. To me, when I think about being a high ticket guide and not a hand holder, it really comes down to accepting that my client has their own responsibility. And when I accept and when I fully accept my client has responsibility for what it is that they're doing and their own journey, I would actually do them a disservice if I was doing too much hand holding, because then they claim a dependence on me, and dependence is dangerous, right? Ultimately, the best thing that we can provide for our clients as coaches is for our clients to be, by the end of our program, the whole idea is that they're self-led, that they understand that they can become independent learners, independent thinkers, and they can do things on their own. And so if I ever have a client who's coming to me and asking me, like, like for permission for every single little thing that they post, it's usually a red flag to me. And so if they're a beginner, yeah, I'll give them those permission slips. But then after time, I will, ask them, well, what do you want to post? Or which one do you like the best? Or which one do you feel like is the best one for your specific community? And then that requires the client to kind of go back and claim that self-empowerment, to claim that identity of like, oh yeah, I could actually know what I'm doing as well, and to trust themselves. Because ultimately we want our clients to trust themselves. We want them to claim their own empowerment. And if we're constantly holding their hand, truly, I believe that that's doing them more of a disservice. And so you want to try to find the match between holding their hand, making sure that they're accountable, and understanding when they go through patterns of self-sabotage, but at the same time, not holding their hand too much where, by the end of the coaching program with you, all they've done is relied on your advice to make decisions. You want them to make decisions on their own. And that's ultimately what your coaching is going to do, is empower them to make their own decisions.
I have to say, you have been exceptional at implementing this in your program.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I actually noticed it where I can just, let me see, like I felt unsteady, let's say standing on my own, making different decisions because you in your program were giving me very strong guidance, but I had to take that and move on my own.
Yeah.
And it was it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary, but it does empower me where I don't feel like you're babysitting me. I'm
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I get to be on my own.
Yeah, and I think that that's really beautiful, and I think that, a good coach is always going to make sure that they hold that middle ground for you, where it's not just about um making you do everything and just kind of showing up and being like, yeah, it's great. What you're doing is great. Keep going. It's more of a, hey, what is it that you're working on? Can I see it? And then how do you feel about what it is that you're working on so you can have that middle ground? And sometimes I also ask or I wouldn't say ask. Sometimes what I do with my clients is I will give them the perspective of coach, and then I'll also give them the perspective of mentor. And so I'll be like, okay, as a mentor, I will, discuss with you that based on off of experience that I've seen with my clients, I know that this specific angle tends to work well or better in your marketing. But as a coach, I actually want to ask you which one you feel more intuitively called to. And then that way they get two different perspectives. They get the coach or the consultant or mentor type of perspective of, based off of my experience, this is what I've seen. But then they also get the coach who's just like, well, what does your intuition tell you? Because I personally believe that, especially as business coaches, we can't just be coaches, because I think that that would also be doing you guys a disservice, right? You're not only hiring me just so that I can tell you to focus on your intuition, right?
Right.
You want to work with someone who's been there because you want them to point out potential problems with the way that they're doing things, which is not necessarily what a coach would do. That's more of a consultant or a mentorship type role. But then if you're too much of a consultant or if you're too much of a mentor, what ends up happening is you're just talking at your client and you're just telling your client what to do all of the time. And that once again creates more dependency. And so I like to kind of mesh the two together. And I hope that that might help you. I'm not sure how it is necessarily in relationship coaching, but I'd imagine it would probably be very similar.
Yes, yes. No, I find that many times your client can start to try to have you hold their hand.
Right. And I would bet too that, let's say, for example, a client, you might know for their clients, you might be acting as relationship consultant and you might say, do not go back to him. Right. Or like
Yeah,
that is a bad idea. But as a coach, you might understand that that client might need to go back to that relationship one more time to truly learn the lesson that they needed to learn. And so if that's the case, then yeah, the client needs to be self-led and the client needs to have the empowerment to make their own decisions, but then also learn from them.
right.
Right.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, let's
Okay.
do more. Do you have any more?
I do.
Perfect.
Let's see. Well, as a mother and a wife, and I'm also a trauma survivor, my
Mhm.
my energy is sacred. And what are the most aligned ways to scale my business without replicating burnout
Mm,
in my business?
mhm, mhm. All right. So I totally get everything that you're saying, right? You have a lot of different roles within your house, you have a lot of roles within your life, and you want to make sure that burnout isn't a thing as you're growing and scaling everything that you're doing. So, if that's the case for you, and if you want to really like consciously grow while protecting your energy and really protecting the thing that you've built, this is what has helped me the most. So, the first thing is outsourcing, obviously, right? But also deciding what it is that you're going to outsource first. And so I find that a common thing that I see with a lot of clients that then ends up getting them into trouble is they will outsource really expensive tasks first. without necessarily having the income generated to do that. And so the first thing that I would say is outsource your minimum wage tasks first. Outsource anything that's most minimum wage and anything that involves bringing in leads, because those are like the two top things that need to happen in a business before you outsource anything else. So I've seen clients who are like, they hire OBMs first, or they hire someone to do their sales pages that cost $30 an hour. And to that, I would always say, okay, well, that's going to burn through your funds very, very quickly. And then the problem with that as well is that none of those things are actually helping you to get more clients. So you want to first fund the things that bring you more clients and the things that are lower skilled, because the lower skilled is obviously going to be a lower amount that you're going to have to pay someone else. And you're going to start to get more work done in less time. And then as those lower skilled tasks become filled, and then as you start to solve your lead generation problem by getting more people in, then with lead generation, of course, that's going to lead to more money, right? So when you have more leads, you have more sales. When you have more sales, you have more money. And so after you have more leads and more sales, then you start outsourcing more higher skilled projects for your business, right? And so when I started outsourcing, when I was at six figures, I had one assistant and she was in the Philippines. And so I paid her a very small amount per hour because it was a low skill task. And in the Philippines, she didn't need more than that to, like maintain a really good lifestyle. And then after I outsourced for her, my second outsourcing was someone who helped me create content, which is a little bit more higher skilled than what I was having her do. So then I was like, okay, another person who's a little bit more higher paid. And then came my setter, who was a little bit more higher paid. And so you kind of just start to outsource as much as you can, but depending on what the current place is that you're at in terms of your business. Because if you're not careful, you can start outsourcing people at like $30 to $50 an hour that are not actually helping you to bring new clients in. And so then you're still stuck with no clients, or you're still stuck with a very small amount of clients. You're still the one who's putting all of your energy into bringing in those clients. But then unfortunately at that point, then then most of your overhead is going to pay, someone who's working underneath you, but it isn't actually helping you to generate income. So those are my biggest tips.
Yeah, no, those are good tips. Especially with the ones with the content.
Yeah.
I find that takes up so much time.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's another really interesting thing about content is it might take a lot of time for you, but it might not take a lot of time for someone else whose skill set is content. And so that's a beautiful part of scaling is then you get to start hiring A-list players for each and every part of your business. However, one thing that one of my business coaches told me, this was years back, but that helped me so much, was she always said to make sure that everyone on your team creates income for you in some way, right? So make sure that even your content person, how are they creating income for you? How is your person who's building your landing pages or your funnels? Like, how are they also creating additional income for you? Because if someone only wants to be on the back end of your business, but wants to charge $50 an hour, let's say, for example, that person isn't really going to be serving you in the long run unless your business is already very well established.
Right. How are you finding the people that you're hiring out at the right uh, expense level?
Ooh, yeah. So in terms of how I hire people, I'll kind of talk to you about how I used to hire people versus how I hire people now. And I think it really depends as well on like what stage of business you're in. And so when I was just kind of starting out to hire people, I would look at, there's websites like Upwork, there's websites like Fiverr. I still think that they're really great to hire from. You can also check like Facebook groups and you can have a really great vetting process. Grace, because you're one of my clients, there's a module inside of the program that shows you exactly how to do that and exactly how to have a really great application form for hiring where you're not having to interview a whole bunch of people. You're like really short listing people and you're only getting on, let's say, 2 interviews with the application process that I give you. But that's one way. And so looking at those specific avenues. So Facebook groups, Upwork, Fiverr, there's a few other websites that you can go to that have like really, really great virtual assistant teams But then another way that I've actually really enjoyed finding people to work on my team is one, now that I have the list size and the community size, I literally just ask my community. I just ask them, hey, who wants to work with me? And I find that the people from my community who want to work with me believe in my brand so much and believe in my message so much that by the time they get on the team, they already know everything that I'm about. And they're excited. They're excited to be there. And so I've realized that those are usually some of the best people to have on my team because they already love it, right? They're already sold on the brand. And that to me is just it really, really fills my heart to know that someone believes in my mission so much that they want to work for me. So that's a really great place that I get leads. And then another one, or sorry, not leads, people who are working for me on my team. But then another one that I absolutely love because I think it really does prove that cold outreach really still does work. Is honestly, I get people asking me if I want a VA, if I want a setter. I get those people asking me if I'm looking for someone on my team all the time, and I just get them to fill out my application. They go into my application drawer, and then when I'm looking for someone, I go through and I take a look at their videos, and if I like them, I call them up for an interview. And I find that those people are also very hardworking. I mean, if they're doing cold outreach, it means that they actually are taking, like they have a lot of intention and they have a lot of drive with what they're doing. So I'm actually a lot more likely to hire someone who gives me a cold DM just because of the fact that I know that they're putting in the work.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that speaks volumes. Yeah. Okay. These are good, Sarah.
I know. Let's do one last question.
Oh, okay. What what is your advice for positioning a proprietary framework like my reconnection theory in a way that feels both embodied and magnetic?
Ooh, okay. So when you're doing your own coaching framework, it's really important that you have a unique title for your framework, you have a unique process for your framework, and also your framework, sets you apart, right? And I love the fact that you're already doing that for yourself. And I think that what you've probably already been doing has been great. Now, here are some other ways to like really put everything together. One thing that I've absolutely loved doing is really playing around with words in terms of the words that you use for your proprietary framework and playing around with symbolism. So I had a client once where we designed her framework around the butterfly effect because she had 4 steps. It was a 4-step process for her. And so she just used the 4 sets or the 4 different areas of a butterfly wing. And so the way that she explained it was through a diagram with a butterfly. And so she'd have the butterfly diagram, she'd have her 4 different spots for her wing. Perfect. Let's say, for example, yours could be a caterpillar, right? And so you can have a specific amount of steps for the caterpillar. You can make it into an infographic. And so that's something that I did with my framework is I developed my 6 steps. I tried and tested it over the years. And then I just, I paid someone to do a really beautiful framework with my brand colors. And the framework basically just brings people around, like it's a path essentially because my framework is a path that gets you from A to Z. But if yours is more of like an alchemy, let's say, for example, then you might want to have, because I have another framework that has like 3 circles. And so when we meet the middle of those 3 circles is the flow and is the intention behind your brand. And so you want to create a visualization for your framework that your ideal clients are going to understand. And so they can take that visual with them as they start to understand your business, as they start to understand your brand so that they can have that visual everywhere they go. Does that make sense?
Complete sense. I don't know. It never occurred to me to do that. I've been
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to make it come across with just words alone, but
Right.
a visual would complete that circle.
Yeah, and so it could be a graphic. You can hire someone on Fiverr for it. I know that now Canva actually has its own very easy infographics that you can fill out and you can put your own brand colors within it. And so just find a graphic that serves your purpose. So let's say, for example, if yours is more of like a key, right? And or like if it's a path that you want to design an infographic that looks more like a path, like if there's a specific animal symbol, like those are different ways that you can create your framework that will be in a more memorable way for your clients.
Oh, thank you so much. That is very helpful. I'm going to get on that today.
I know this is so exciting. I'm glad that you asked that question because I was like, ooh, this is actually something that's very applicable to your business right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Grace. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is the Grace Robles. And my podcast Instagram is We Said It with Steve and Grace.
Beautiful. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to come about from this. And yeah, thanks so much for being here, Grace.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. If you enjoy our show and would like the show notes and free goodies about how to grow your online coaching business, head over to sarajloureiro.com for more information. We hope you'll tune in next time.